Hello and welcome, friends, to Journeying Through First John. I'm here again with my friends Isai and Oddie. Y'all know me.
Hello.
I'm Josh. And this time around, we're going to be reading through verses 18 through 27 of chapter 2. So grab a cup of coffee. This time I got water. I'm brewing it this morning. But just pause the video for a moment to just read through, and we're just going to gather some points and just have a short conversation on this section.
So one of the first things that I see right off the bat is the idea of relationship, because this section sort of closes off the first half of the letter of First John. And we see throughout these different chapters, throughout this first half, throughout this first section, it talks a lot about the idea of being in relationship with God. We see phrases such as being in God, being in Him, in the Spirit, having fellowship. So it really brings about this relational focus. And we even see the close of this section talking about us being God's children. But the crux of it, I think, is that the enemy wants to disrupt our relationship with God. And he does this by two different ways, at least two ways that John talks about. The first is making us doubt who he is. And we see this when he talks about sort of denying Jesus as the Messiah, forgetting or doubting the things that we know to be true about him. And then the second way that we see him disrupting the relationship is by giving us alternatives for his place in our life. And we see this with the word antichrist. Now, when we say antichrist, a lot of people think of like somebody that is in opposition to Christ, sort of like his arch enemy or something like that. But that's not what it means in Greek. In Greek, it's actually just anti is a preposition, and it means in place of. So in the beginning of the Gospel of John, when we heard the phrase, from the fullness of Christ, we receive grace upon grace. The word that it's translated as upon is actually anti. It means in place of. So we receive grace in place of grace. And here, the same thing is true. I mean, it's somebody that is, or something that is trying to take the place of Christ in our life. So it's by these two methods that we see the enemy continuously trying to disrupt this relational focus that we have with God, with the Father, with the Spirit, with the Son. And we see this especially being true in the last days. I mean, John thought he was in the last days. Then how much more does it ring true for us today, right? Wow. Now, I'm not saying that we're in the end times right now, and Corona is what's going to take us there. What I'm saying is that we should have a focus on this relationship. It's important. It's of utmost important to be in relationship with
God.
man,
that's so awesome, man. And this idea of anti-Christ, man, it's so interesting that he tells us that there's various antichrists that have appeared, right? And then one thing that caught my mind is in verse 19, it says that these people left our churches, but they never really belonged with us. And it's interesting the approach that the enemy takes to disrupt our relationship with God, especially as a church, that what's going on is that there's religion that's rising up. There's different theories that are rising up that are coming in from inside, right? Instead of like the world coming in and putting secularism and all these different things, these worries that I hear often, it's often that the enemy comes within and uses people to divide the church. And it uses that same spirit so imagine church with inside Christ, someone taking the place of Christ. Imagine what that looks like. And that's often where we find ourselves whenever we take our eyes off of Christ. And another thing that just really just so rings so true with this is that in verse 24, he says, remain faithful to what you have been taught from the beginning. Now, this isn't, the first thing you've ever heard about Jesus, but that's true, right? Because we all come from different, walks in life. And maybe what we heard at first wasn't the correct thing, but we grew in understanding. But what it's saying here is that I think it's what it's pointing us to: remain faithful to what's most important. And that's why this relational view of salvation, this relational view of, standing firm, is so important for us, that we must remain faithful to Jesus being the only way of salvation, not our works, not our knowledge, not anything else, but staying close to that truth, that fellowship. And it says, if you do, you will remain in fellowship with the Son and with the Father. So that's awesome stuff.
What's so cool is he makes that possible. It's not something that is you have to figure out how to have this relationship or reach him. He comes down and he sends his Spirit. Jesus didn't just ascend to heaven and leave us behind. He wants us to continue to abide in him, to walk with him. And what's awesome is he said he left his Spirit for us. He's comforter, provider. And what's awesome about this text is he tells us he guides us into all truth and he teaches us truth. And it reminds me, when Jesus said he is the way, truth, and life. As we're abiding in Jesus, this relationship is continuing, and we can stand in him knowing that that Christ is our way for salvation. The Holy Spirit, he's guiding us to know truth, and he doesn't want us to be astray. He doesn't want us to be swayed by lies. And so we can stand in him. We can be grounded in the Holy Spirit, and he lives with us. He walks with us. I like how in verse 26, he says, you've received the Holy Spirit and he lives within you. So you don't need anyone to teach you what is true. So all of, like what you were mentioning, Josh, we need to be sure that our relationship with Christ is solid, that that relationship with him is ultimately what matters, and all this other theology or false teaching of who Christ is won't affect our relationship with Jesus, because our relationship with Jesus is grounded in what the Holy Spirit has led us about his truth, about the truth. And so he teaches us what we need to know. No, I was just going to say, he just tells us to remain in him, and by doing that, we remain in fellowship with Christ.
So let's finish off. Let's finish off with that. Actually, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. May we be comforted with the knowledge that the Holy Spirit is with us. And may our focus be that we have a relationship with Father, with the Son, and with the Holy Spirit. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.